Hey guys, so today we're doing something a bit different on my channel. I thought this was really interesting. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Pascal's wager, which is basically the idea of if you have to choose between Christianity and atheism, the more rational choice would be Christianity because if you're Christian and you're wrong, then nothing happens after you die. But if you're an atheist and you're wrong, then you go to hell forever. So the more rational choice is to be a Christian. And I could go into talking about how that's been misinterpreted over the years. Never really supposed to be an argument for Christianity, just to show that if you're in between both or you think both could be true, then the reason you're not choosing Christianity is because of your passions. That's what Blaise Pascal originally wanted to convey by Pascal's wager. So, not really supposed to be an argument for Christianity. But another thing that has been talked about with Pascal's wager is it only mentions those two worldviews, Christianity and atheism. And then atheists will often say, well, if that's true, which God should I worship if I have to believe in God to avoid hell? So this got me thinking, and I started looking into avoid hell. Now, for me, I'm firmly committed Christian. I believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. And I have plenty of other videos on this channel talking about why. That's why I made this channel. But this video is not going to be proof for Christianity. If you want evidence for Christianity or why I believe it's true, then look at my other videos. Today, I just wanted to take a look at how each religion, philosophy, worldview fares on the matrix of Pascal's wager. Should I believe that worldview, or will I be okay if I don't believe in that worldview, even if that worldview is true? So that's just kind of what I wanted to do today. I'd say I went through a pretty extensive list of worldviews that people believe. So I hope you enjoy it, and we'll just go through each one. You can see I have 6 tiers here. Bottom one is guaranteed second chance, which basically means in this world, if you die and you're wrong, you still will have another chance to get it right, or pretty much there's no final sealing off at death. This one, your choice doesn't really matter, basically means that whatever you choose in this life, whatever actions you take in this life, won't really affect your final outcome. And so it doesn't really matter if you believe it's right or wrong. It's just going to happen. The same thing's just going to happen anyways. This one, virtuous outsiders rewarded. Well, this one, you still need to be practicing at least some minimal form of virtue in order to have a second chance, but you still can win in this worldview even if you're wrong. Still a chance. This one, natural immortality. This one's more complicated as closer to it. Very specific worldviews that I have in mind here. Basically, you do have to do stuff in this world, or maybe not. It depends on the worldview, and we'll get to that, but not too big on eternal consequences. This one, annihilation for outsiders. If you're wrong in this world, your soul gets destroyed, and you just stop existing forever. And then, of course, top tier of Pascal's wager, eternal heaven and hell. Which means if you're wrong on this one, then it's going to be a long eternity, just saying. So let's just get into it then. Starting with the first worldview, we have Hinduism, which is going to go guaranteed second chance. Now, there might be one school of Hinduism that disagrees with this. We'll get into that later. But for the absolute most part, 99% of Hindus believe in reincarnation, infinite amount of times, and hypothetically, no matter how many times you fail to reach moksha, liberation, in this life, you'll get another chance at it. But that doesn't come with some caveats. You can get farther away from moksha. It might be a lot harder. You might have to reincarnate a bunch more times. In fact, a lot of Hindus believe a lot of people will have to reincarnate millions of times before they can finally achieve liberation. But there's no finality. You can always choose to get back on the right path according to this religion anyways. So overall, not very high stakes. Next up, we have Buddhism, which is also going to be in guaranteed second chance. Now, I'm actually going to rank this slightly higher, by the way. The higher on worldviews are, the higher they rank on Pascal's matrix. So, Buddhism, I'm going to say it ranks slightly higher because Hinduism doesn't Hinduism does have a concept of hell. It's usually pretty short-lived from what I hear, but Buddhism, on the other hand, if you really mess up in this life, then you'll be spending millions upon millions of years in hell. And yeah, not a fun time. And there are lots of different. You can look it up. There are lots of different intricate Buddhist hells with specific tortures and everything. It's pretty crazy. That's why we're ranking it above Hinduism. However, Buddhism, even if you commit the worst crimes imaginable, even if you kill the Buddha himself, you may be spending trillions upon trillions of years in hell, but eventually everyone in hell will get out. They'll reincarnated, they'll exhaust their karma, and they'll have another chance. So Buddhism, the same boat, similar to Hinduism at least in that regard. Same thing with Jainism, and I'm going to be ranking this in between Hinduism and Buddhism because for them, there's not really as much of a concept as hell, but there is the idea that human births are exceedingly rare, and so if you waste this opportunity, if you're human, you waste that opportunity, then it might be a while before you get another chance at it. So that's why just have a little bit of oomph to it, but really not. It's still unlimited reincarnation, so you always have that another chance at it. Next up, Taoism. Actually, I'm going to save this for a bit later, but Shintoism. Now, in Shinto, and we might as well put most folk religions up there too. So in terms of folk indigenous traditions, it's very interesting with them. And if you're wondering, no, I'm not going through every folk tradition in the world. That would be much longer tier list. You know, it's funny, when people talk about Pascal's wager and says, which god am I supposed to choose out of the 4,000 religions? Most of those religions are going to be, in the world, are going to be folk traditions. There's only really 4 or 5 real world religions that preach a universal message. The characteristics of most folk traditions is that they're really focused on the culture they're in, so they don't really care that much about outsiders. Outsiders aren't really part of their spiritual system of salvation. That's why throughout history, indigenous peoples almost never will evangelize their gods or their religion. Maybe for political purposes, but that's about it. No concept of, if you don't worship my gods, then there's going to be eternal consequences. There's no concept of that. It's really just meant for social cohesion in the tribe, and just cultural practices, so really not. And they are also more focused on this life. A lot of the worship of the gods boils down to what happens in this life. Of course, there's focus on the afterlife too, but mainly this life is going to be the theme in most folk religions. And of course, Shinto being a folk religion, that's why I rank them both together. Another thing is that in folk religion, if usually the worst thing that can happen to you is you become a hungry ghost, which means go around and haunt the living. And you might be cold and hungry and alone and everything, which is not great, obviously. But these cultures often perform rituals to make hungry ghosts go away or be at peace. So there's a concept of post-mortem redemption of sorts, and a concept of they want to do this redemption because otherwise you're going to be haunted by you. So you can actually change your fate there a little bit. If you just knock over enough vases, you can get your family members to be like, let's make sure he's all right. So not really high stakes there. And since a lot of them don't have a concept of universal truth for all peoples and not that stuff. If you're not part of those cultures, you're not really going to be implicated at all. You might be outside the plan of salvation, or they might just say what has been often said. What often happens throughout history is that different folk religions will just, when they come in contact with other people, just take on their gods and worship their gods. So not really, very fluid, very, I don't want to say relativistic, but in a way not really focused on universal. If you don't believe this, if you don't hold to this doctrine, if you don't practice these virtues, then there's going to be consequences. That's why maybe guaranteed second chance isn't quite fit. Maybe choice doesn't matter. Might have some truth in it too, but I just put it here because in most folk traditions, depending on your culture, you can talk to people of your culture through apparitions and stuff like that. ghost hunters, I guess, and get a more peaceful afterlife that way after you die. So that's why it's not ranked that highly. Next up, we have Sikhism, also believes in reincarnation. So, and not really a concept of Buddhist hells. Hell is more just separation from God, they believe. So, don't like physical torments. Next up, which one is this? Next up, we have a really interesting one. I bet a lot of you haven't heard of this one. It's called Manichaeism. Basically, this is kind of wild, but deciding if I should rank it above or below Jainism. Let's put it here. So Manichaeism, basically, it's crazy because Manichaeism used to be a huge phenomenon. It used to be one of the world religions, and today it basically no longer exists. But what happened is around the 3rd century, so in the 200s AD, there was this guy called Mani. Hold on, give me 1 second. So next up, we have kind of a crazy religion called Manichaeism. So basically, in the 3rd century AD, so basically the 200s AD, in the Persian Empire, there was this guy called Mani, spelled Mani, just to clarify. And he went around preaching basically that he was the next greatest prophet after Buddha, Zoroaster, Jesus. He was the final prophet for mankind. Sounds familiar. Well, but anyways, he had this complex cosmology. A lot of Gnostic elements were included, but also a lot of Eastern elements as well. Very interesting religion. I'd recommend looking it up if you want to learn more, because it's kind of complicated, but basically he believed that this realm of light and then the material world is the darkness, and the material world traps some fragments of the light inside of it. So the job of Manichaeans was to free the light from the darkness and to bring liberation. And so the way it worked is that salvation is if you were what's called one of the elect, which is the top tier of their religion, then basically go straight to the realm of light after you die. If you're one of the hearers, then you get reincarnated, but basically have no chance. If you were not, it's a little more complicated if you're a non-believer, but basically you obviously would not go to the realm of light, but also you would have to stay in. But basically you still have those fragments of light within you. And many believe that at the end of time, all of the light will be liberated from the darkness. So I guess if you were more dark than light, if most of you was dark, then you might get trapped in prison forever. But you also get infinite reincarnations until the end of the world. So you basically have another chance. It's very interesting because this religion spread from Spain all the way to China. It's huge. And then a bunch of different factors. The Roman Empire cracking down on it, Muslims, and Tang Dynasty all brought it to a screeching halt. It used to be a major world religion, but now it doesn't even exist today. So just a crazy story. But it ranks it above Jainism because it does emphasize selective membership and salvation to be part of their religion, while Jainism is kind of more like moral principles, at least from my understanding. And then ranked below Buddhism because they still don't have the complex concept of the different hell realms. And we also have some Chinese folk religion, specifically folk Taoism. Philosophical Taoism is actually kind of pretty different, but we'll get into that. But just like the religious aspect of Taoism, it goes put it here because in their view, if you're a wicked person, you basically go through a bureaucracy after you die where you get your punishment burned off and then you reincarnate again. So yeah, really not high stakes, but those tortures still aren't fun. So in their view, you should still avoid that. But not human birth is more common in their view than in Jainism, so you have more chances. Oops. Next up, Baha'i. This is gonna rank pretty low since they believe that the religions that came before are also paths to God. They just believe that their prophet is the best prophet, but other religions are paths to God. There's no really concept of eternal hell, mostly reincarnation. It's pretty progressive movement from what I understand, so not really going to rank very high. It is kind of premised on bringing all religions together, so pretty low on the Pascal's wager scale. Next up is going to be New Age, that's going to be, put it here. Basically, New Age is a mismatch of different, taking Eastern philosophy and mixing it with all kinds of different practices and gurus and stuff. I don't know, it's kind of crazy, but I guess my bias is showing a little bit here, but you know what? It's my video, it's my YouTube channel, so whatever. No really concept of eternal hell. It's kind of a lot of your spiritual but not religious people are going to be part of it. You're going to have some of these ideas, and their whole thing is a big reason why is because they reject the idea of eternal hell altogether. There might be some temporary punishment for evil people, but also pretty relativist. So people of other religions are probably just gonna say as long as you're a good person according to their standard, then there's nothing really to worry about for this one. So next one, esotericism here, because basically I just use it as a general category for just movements throughout history, whether Rosicrucianism or Hermeticism or Freemasonry or whatever. Just, you know, secret societies that prioritize secret knowledge and all that to achieve enlightenment, or even witchcraft and magic and Wicca and that stuff. All of them pretty much say that if not reincarnation, just some form of another opportunity. Nothing's fixed with them. So ranked pretty low on the matrix. And this one we have, it's called Orphism. It's basically going to be the idea that if you have to go through their form of philosophical contemplation, and if you, they do also have some strict moral rules, and if you don't, you get a lower reincarnation most likely, but their ultimate goal is to reunite with ultimate reality. But if you mess up in this life, you'll still have more opportunities. And in a similar vein, we also have Pythagoreanism, basically your old math guy, Pythagorean theorem and all that. He also kind of ran a cult where it's very interesting stuff, but basically pretty as much the same thing as Orphism. If you mess up in this life, you can be reincarnated, but the way to be saved is basically contemplating mathematics, philosophical contemplation, all that stuff. So, and then to round off, there'll be more Greek philosophy later, but to round it off for now, with this tier, we're going to have, of course, Platonism. So Plato was a brilliant man, of course, but his view of the world is basically the goal of life is through philosophical contemplation to get out of the cave, if you ever heard of the cave analogy, and basically reunite with the one. And it's the same thing with, you believed in reincarnation and all that, so if you messed up even badly, you'd get another chance. And this also applies to Neoplatonism, which was formalized by Plotinus into the system of the one, the monad, the intellect, and basically the same stuff. And then next up we have Tenrikyo, which is basically movement in Japan where they're monotheistic, they believe in God. They also believe in reincarnation and positivity, and so, as you can guess, not really a big emphasis on hell, so they're going to rank pretty low. Next up, if you don't know who this is, Carl Jung, and he's going to rank, put him up here. I think it's a good spot for him, because his views, his metaphysical views, or he believed in the collective unconscious, basically there's certain archetypes that people have, that patterns that pop up throughout the history of the world. He also had very vivid visions of life after death. It seems that for him, there's no concept of the mind being stuck. Well, he did have a concept of the mind being stuck, but no idea of there's a no return point where you can't change your mind. Even after you die, you still have the possibility to change and grow psychologically. So there's nothing really too frightening about his worldview in that regard. This one, we have panpsychism, which this one's also going to rank fairly low. Panpsychism, basically the idea that within matter, there's also consciousness in all matter, that consciousness is fundamental. It doesn't just exist in the brain. And so this one, in this view, after you die, your consciousness might just, like a drop, return to the ocean of consciousness. You might become merge with the whole. So this view, there's not really much to, I guess, be held accountable to. I guess there's a view that if you're hurting others, you're hurting the whole, and that's valid. But if you merge the whole universe, I don't think it's going to really rank that high. This is interesting. We have quantum immortality. This one's interesting. Put it here. In this view, basically, this is kind of a fringe theory in physics that has to do with Schrodinger's cat. Basically, if you have a cat in a box and there's a 50-50, and there's a gun pointed at him, and there's a 50-50 chance that when you open that box, the cat will either be dead or alive. So basically, if you open the box and before you open the box, there is a cat could either be dead or alive. It's only when you open the box that the cat is dead or alive. And it's basically used in explaining wave function collapse and a bunch of other stuff that I don't really understand, to be honest. But this is not really a discussion of quantum physics, way out of my purview. This is just looking at the view that when you die, there's a split in the multiverse. So basically, when you die, there's a universe where you die, and there's a universe where you're alive, and you only experience the universe where you're still living. So basically, you never die, because every time you would die, there's a split in the multiverse, and you only experience the universe where you live. You can see others die around you, and you can experience that, but you can never experience your own death, because you can't experience when you're dead, at least in the materialist presuppositions that are usually go behind this theory. So, and it's kind of a pretty fringe idea, but there you go. It's going to be basically you kind of immortal, so basically get as second chances you want and as many choices to make in this world as you want. So the world's kind of your oyster, I guess, or maybe not if you get trapped in some torture chamber created by some evil mastermind in the far future, like some mustache twirling villain, but you can never die. I guess that would not be fantastic, but there you go. That's quantum immortality. This one, open consciousness theory. A lot of similarity with panpsychism, except in open consciousness. It's not that all matter is infused with consciousness, it's just that those who have consciousness, like humans and animals, aren't really separate beings with their own consciousnesses. It's all just one collective pool of consciousness. I don't fully understand it, but basically consciousness is seen less of not different distinct things of consciousness, but one field, one ocean of consciousness. So a lot of similarity with panpsychism, but not exactly identical, and it's going to rank about the same because you can technically hurt yourself, but you're also technically immortal, so quote unquote you has as many chances to change as you want. This one, idealism. Put it up here. Similar idea. I'll try to put it here. Basically, idealism, it's kind of a strange worldview. Have you ever heard of the worldview of solipsism? Basically, the idea that the whole world is really just your mind and projections of your mind. Well, this is like it, except in idealism, you actually have other consciousnesses, but the matter doesn't actually exist, and the world is just mind and ideas. For me, it's kind of hard to see that, but I guess some people find it convincing, and I'm sure they have their reasons for why. For this one, for the afterlife, since I guess they'd usually affirm an afterlife, I think, since if the world is, the idea of death is based on your physical material body no longer working. But if, I guess that'd probably be an illusion if matter itself is really just an illusion. So since if consciousness, if your mind is fundamental, then after you die, I guess you just keep existing, or maybe something else. But this one, I say second chance, because if your mind, unless your mind radically shifts, which is not the view of most, I don't think that's the view of most idealist philosophers, unless there's a radical shift where you can no longer change your mind, then you always have the opportunity to grow and find peace, I guess. So not very high stakes in there. Of course, you can make the choice to just forever be locked in a state of hatred or evil and destroy yourself that way, but there's always that opportunity of chance. There's always. Next up we have Kabbalah. So for the religion of rabbinical Judaism, it's going to get kind of complicated, for a lot of different Jews believe different stuff. So there are going to be different religions. So there are going to be different Jews at different places on the scale. But for Kabbalah,
it's going to rank. It's going to be pretty low on the scale, I'd say, because it draws a lot of ideas from Neoplatonism, from Gnosticism, basically, and it's very mainstream in Judaism. Basically, they believe in reincarnation for, I don't think there's really exceptions for which souls get reincarnated. I guess if you're a really bad guy, you have a short mustache, you know what I'm saying, but it might be an exception. But for most people, probably just going to get reincarnated until there's harmony between all things. So, not really strong on eternal condemnation. You see this a lot with more mystical traditions, a lot of focus on unity between all things. So, especially with Kabbalah. Next up, we call it universalism. We have Origen, who was the guy who came up with it, and then there's some other church fathers who believe in universalism. Origen obviously is not condoned by the church, and then obviously it's made a resurgence in the modern day with people like the Unitarian Universalists and different groups. But if you believe God's going to save all people eventually, even it doesn't mean there's not going to be punishment for, or doesn't mean there's not going to be a need for cleansing, and that cleansing can be very painful, but eventually all souls will be with God for all eternity, so not very high stakes there. In fact, I might put it, just because of the purification aspect, I might put it a bit higher. Maybe here might be good. This one, progressivism, basically the general idea of what I guess a lot of liberals are atheists or agnostics. And then a lot of them are spiritual but not religious, but just, I guess, general progressive ethos of if there is an afterlife, it's going to be hippy dippy, kumbaya, all that stuff. So, and they really do not like the idea of eternal consequence. So, or consequences in general. I'm being kind of, well, that's true. So, anyways, they do have a strict moral code, though, especially if you're a white guy. So, I might be in trouble. But generally, eternal condemnation is kind of rejected unless you're old Adolf. Let's just say that. Up next, we have, I believe this is Mandaism, which is a form of Gnosticism, but they believe in reincarnation. But the more you get reincarnated, the more you might move farther away from God and get trapped. So we're going to rank this higher on the list. Here would be good. Basically, the only surviving Gnostic religion in the world, besides the revivals of Gnosticism that have been happening lately on places like TikTok. But next we have Voltaire here. It's going to represent moral philosophers in general, but also more specifically Enlightenment age, rationalist, mostly deistic philosophers who are gonna reject the idea of eternal torment. Say if there is punishment in the afterlife, it's gonna be based on what you do rather than what you say or what you believe. So, pretty not gonna rank very high on here. Right around there would be good. Next up, we have Hadsiism. I don't know exactly how I pronounce it, but kind of Gnostic as well, kind of similar to the Mandaeans, but they also believe in reincarnation. You also can't really join them anyway. It's very much a cultural thing. So just put them right around there. Next up, Scientology. Oh boy. This one, if you don't pay them a lot of money, luckily you still don't go to hell, but also why want to join this thing anyways? Pascal's wager. You can get a negative reincarnation, I guess, but not very high on the list here. This next one is interesting. This is going to be Zoroastrianism, which is the religion of ancient Persia. And they had a very interesting doctrine. Basically, at the end of time, all who basically at the end of time, the battle for evil will be won, and then all of the wicked will be redeemed. And so, pretty similar to Christian universalism, Zoroastrianism, it's more of an ethnic religion, so those folk religion elements mixed in of not caring as much about the fate of outsiders, not trying as much to convert people. So, and also it could be argued that the idea of universal restoration might be a later idea, or annihilation also could be present, but just the ethnic element that makes the folk religion element that makes it not really universal religion, even though it makes universal claims, not going to rank very highly. Plus today, pretty much all Zoroastrianism, all Zoroastrians, not a lot left of them by the way, but all of them that don't affirm universal salvation do it not because they are strict hardliners on exclusive Zoroastrian belief, but more because they're more secular and don't really believe in afterlife at all. So, but universal restoration is pretty standard doctrine throughout Zoroastrian history. This one, matrixism, the idea that we're trapped in the matrix and trapped in the matrix, bro. But I don't really. There's an actual religion, by the way. I don't think people take it that seriously, but basically the idea that if we're waiting for a messiah like Neo to come and save us from the computer system. But this one doesn't really talk about an afterlife that much and talks about there's going to be liberation for all, so I guess it's not going to rank that highly. Maybe I'll put it Swedenborgianism. Now, this is a very interesting movement. Basically taught that when you die, it was found, I believe, the 17th century. It's much more of a, I guess you could say, progressive church that tried to move away from traditional doctrines, and they taught that when you die, basically, you get to choose where you go based on your affections, your loves, and if you choose evil, if you love evil more than you love love, then you can be locked in that state forever. But I'd say it's very lenient in that regard, so that's why it's in this tier. Next up, we have the Moonies, the Unification Church, who believe that their Messiah is a dead. From what I can tell, they believe in reincarnation / a spirit world for unbelievers, so not really ranking that highly there. Next up is going to be Leo Tolstoy and those who follow his version of Christianity, just kind of general hippieism, not kind of rejecting the idea of hell and just embracing pacifism and all that stuff. Not going to rank very highly there. This one's interesting. This is going to be Christian Science. Not very Christian or scientific in my view. This one's going to be Christian Science. And probably go near idealism, actually, because very similar belief in mind as the reality. They're famous for telling their congregants not to receive medicine or go to medical doctors, but just pray about it, which is not really the teaching of traditional Christianity. Of course, prayer is very effective, but nothing wrong with seeking medicine, using the natural world that God's given us to use it to try to find a cure for humanity. But that's not what Christian Science believes. And they believe that the material world's fake and that divine love is paramount. So they really don't like the idea of hell, from what I understand. There you go. Next up, we have process philosophy / theology. This is the idea that reality is just a process of different stuff happening, and God is the universe, and we're all just moving towards a positive direction. So, since we're all moving towards a positive direction, probably going to be pretty close to universalism. Probably going to go near the bottom. What do you have up next? Cathars / Bogomils. These were agnostic heretics who lived in the medieval era. They taught reincarnation, but they did teach stricter salvation rules if you want to be saved, but they did teach reincarnation for whichever one, so I'm going to rank pretty close to Manichaeism, actually, because there's a lot of similarity there in that regard. Next up, we have liberal Judaism. Now, this one, there are a lot of Jews that are straight up atheists, but liberal Judaism is more lines with the New Age or reincarnation, those ideas. So, not going to rank very highly. Actually, probably go best up here next to progressivism. Next up, we have the Medea. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it. Sorry if I messed that up, which I probably did. But this is a form of Islam that believes in reincarnation and second chances and all of that. So, considered outside the mainstream, heretical, you might call it. But going to be at the bottom tier here. So, there we go. Then up next, we have Alawites, which another fringe sect of Islam. They're also not going to rank highly. They also believe in reincarnation, very mystical, so there you go. This one's going to be interesting. This is information theory, basically the idea that the fundamental basics of matter is information. So basically we live in an information universe. This one is honestly really doesn't really fit great on this whole tier list in terms of describing what's your fate going to be. But I guess there is potential if your pattern repeats in the information system, computational system, then you get another chance, I guess. And also there's ideas that we'll get to later of you not really dying because time's kind of a myth. But Very interesting world, if you ask me. Very, I think the rise of this worldview very dependent on the whole idea of computation in human thought, anyways. So just a bit strange. This one, simulation theory, pretty similar to the Matrix, but in this version, you get its reincarnation. Since now, if we really do live in a simulation, which I highly doubt, but if we really do, then we really can't know anything about it. Just put this at the bottom, because if you get another chance in simulation, then that goes in guaranteed second chance. Pretty self-explanatory. This one, there's a similar idea of an AI mind. This is going to go pretty much at the bottom. This is the idea that goes along with solipsism. Basically, reality is, our reality at least, is a simulation run by an AI hive mind that's trying to, I guess, understand the best, understand different scenarios and everything, and trying to run simulations to understand the world. So I guess you can also do AI mind slash solipsism. Basically, your mind is a projection of the AI, or your mind's projection of your greater mind. So there's not really a lot of risk here, because ultimately you are basically God in this worldview. So you can rank pretty much at the bottom. This one's interesting. This is a mathematical universe. So I don't know if I want to rank it in this tier, actually. I'll go in this one. Just gonna rank up here, because in this one, the idea is the universe is fundamentally math. It's a math structure. We live in a level 4 multiverse, and so basically, I guess the idea of you could repeat in multiple universes, but all happening. It's not really like it's excessive. It's more happening at the same time, or even if they, I guess, don't believe in time, maybe, I don't know. It's a very interesting theory, but it's going here because you basically have this life, but you also have other lives. You don't really get to interact with them that much, but technically you do have other chances, I guess. And time is a construct, it's a myth, it's kind of an illusion. So I guess you're kind of stuck with what you got in this universe. So better make the most of what you have here, but it could be redeemed in another universe. So I'm just gonna keep it here. This one, if you want to build your worldview based on nature, then in nature we see a lot of cycles, a lot of second chances. So rank similarly to that. So we have Gnosticism, and Gnosticism is going to rank at, this one depends, because you could technically get trapped near forever if you keep rejecting what they see as true knowledge. And I'll put it next to Carl Jung, because he had a lot of influence from Gnosticism. But you do get, in most systems, you get reincarnated a whole bunch of times, so not really as big of a threat. And actually, it's time for our next tier, which is your choice doesn't matter. The first one in this tier is going to be the idea of a cyclical cosmos, that time is circular, time is cyclical, keeps repeating. This is going to be the view of most cultures throughout history, and the view of most pagans. And this one, no matter what you do in this world, the same patterns of reality are just going to keep happening. And so there's this idea of cyclical time. What you do is going to just keep happening. So actually, this one might be better up here in this tier. No, because you're still not technically immortal. I guess your pattern does kind of repeat. It's not, like I said, not all of these worldviews fit the best on this matrix, but that's the best place I think I can rank it. Now, next worldview where your choice does not really affect your afterlife is going to be Confucianism, because Confucianism, there's no emphasis really on metaphysical reality. Confucius himself was not really concerned with metaphysics, he's more concerned with ethics in this world. So he did emphasize ancestor veneration, but it's more for ethical and societal reasons more than spiritual ones. So in the same vein as that, he didn't really talk about the afterlife, but the same vein as the next one we're going to talk about, which is atheism slash materialism. The idea that matter is all there is. This view, everyone's pretty much going to die anyways, and there's nothing you can really do about it. Then after that, you don't experience anything. So choice does not really matter in that one. Atheism, which is actually the one of the two worldviews in the original Pascal's wager. So that's where it ranks. Surprisingly, even the original one ranks above a lot of other worldviews, as we can see. We have these two philosophies added as well. We have Stoicism and Epicureanism. It's actually interesting, the kind of similarities in some respects between Stoicism and Christianity, especially the concept of the logos and some of the ethics involved in Stoicism, also reflecting Christianity. But Stoicism is going to be, both of them don't really focus on the afterlife at all. Both of them kind of believe that time is cyclical and you die, nothing's really going to happen to you. They're very focused on this life. So Stoicism and Epicureanism. And Epicurus basically said that not worry about death at all. He said, where death is, you are not, and where you are, death is not. So obviously not gonna rank very high on the whole matrix. And then next, we're gonna have a few religions where they do believe in afterlife, but you can't really join them to be saved through them, I guess, anyways. So you can't convert to them anyways, so it doesn't really matter. Put that one there. So this one is gonna be Samaritanism. If you read the Bible, Jesus talking to the woman at the well in John chapter 4. You have the tale of the Good Samaritan. Believe it or not, there are actually Samaritans still alive today. Much less than Jews. There are less than 1,000 Samaritans left in the world, but they still exist, and their religion is they still believe in, still waiting for Messiah, and they're very focused on salvation for their community. It's basically impossible to join into the Samaritan community unless you marry in or something like that. So if you're not a Samaritan, then you can't really get in anyways. This one, I believe this is Zalmoxianism, which is basically one of the mystery religions. I guess one of the proto-mystery religions. I think this is older than the other ones, but I think they believe in reincarnation, but they talked about salvation from their group. But also you can't really join their group anymore because they don't exist. So, and now that I think about it, I'm also going to put the other, now that I think about it, I think I'm also going to put the other mystery religions in this tier 2, because technically your choice did matter back then when they were around, and you had to join their specific community with their specific rituals to achieve salvation. But obviously nowadays, you can't really join them at all, and most of mystery religions were for the people in the Roman army, which you can't really join anymore. Sorry, everybody. We also have the Druze, who are a group in the Middle East. They believe in reincarnation, but what they believe is that everyone who will be saved has already signed a pact, and that those people will be reincarnated as Druze. So if you're not reincarnated as Druze, that means you're not going to be saved because you didn't sign the pact in the past life, according to them. So yeah, if you're not Druze, then you kind of don't have anything left. Choice doesn't really matter. Same with Native American religions, because most of them are closed to conversion. So I guess they probably just say to live your best life now, and in terms of virtue, and let the Great Spirit sort it out. Yeah, we have next. We have this one is simulation, but you basically get deleted, or you die, or you wake up from the video game, you take the VR headset off. Yeah, this one's not going to rank very high. Not really any choice at all on that. You also have Norse mythology. This one is going to be, technically you do kind of choice in here, but it's interesting because ultimately it all comes up the same, because what they believe is most people go to just kind of shadow realm called Helheim, which is actually where the English word for hell in general comes from, the Norse mythology. But you go to Helheim and it's kind of like the Greek concept of Hades, where you're just there and it's boring, I guess. But yeah, the only exception, well, there's 2 exceptions mainly. You can go to Niflheim if you're a murderer or oath breaker, so I guess don't do that. Or you can go to Valhalla if you die in battle. And why do I say your choice doesn't matter then? Because obviously, dying in battle is somewhat of a choice. You can take steps to get closer to that idea. Well, because ultimately the reason you go to Valhalla is so you can be with Odin to prepare for Ragnarok at the end of the world. But at least from what I can tell, at the end of Ragnarok, there's only going to be 2 people left, which means the universe is going to start over again, and you're just not going to have, as far as I can tell,
I'm not sure if the warriors from Valhalla carry on to the next world anyways. There's only going to be two people left anyways, so that's why I put them in choice. Doesn't really matter for Norse. This one's going to be interesting. This is going to be Lovecraftianism, which if you Lovecraft, he, in his view, the world is kind of uncaring. He creates stories that reflected that the universe doesn't really care about what humans think or humans believe. So kind of perfect encapsulation of this tier of choice doesn't matter is that whatever happens, it's going to happen regardless of humans. So if there's an afterlife, he even talked about like that go beyond human logic or understanding. So yeah, there's an afterlife. It's probably not going to care about us very much. Just like the monsters in his stories, like Cthulhu. And yes, that's why he's in this tier, and not just his stories, but his kind of worldview, his ethos of reality doesn't really care about human beings. Next up, we have Rastafarianism. Rastafarianism, that's what they call it. It's gonna go here. Yeah, they also believe in reincarnation, but it's really more of a political movement focused on this world, and it's really not a whole lot of focus on the afterlife altogether. And I think I read if you're white, then you don't really have a lot of hope, anyways. That's why I said it's political movement's very focused on black nationalism. So yeah, what's up, Nation of Islam? This one is similar to this one is very used, very interesting mythology, but this one's pretty similar to Rastafarianism. That's mostly political movement, and also it's kind of the Black Hebrew Israelites as well. So you can kind of as well into these two groups of if you're white, if you're not black, if you're another race, then you basically don't really have a lot of options in the afterlife. In fact, you're pretty much, at least in Nation of Islam, you're pretty much a devil, according to them. So, of course, Malcolm X later converted to more mainstream Islam, so I guess kudos to him. But yeah, pretty much going to round out this tier, except it's not, because, oh yes, I did forget one. This is Falun Gong, which is probably going to rank at the top of guaranteed second chance because they teach reincarnation, but they've been criticized as a cult because they believe that salvation mostly comes through the leadership, comes through the leader, and
if you don't believe in the leader, you're going to get bad karma, but that doesn't mean you're going to be eternally condemned. So, Fallen Gods going here. We do have some others in the choice doesn't matter category. This one, pantheism, is kind of similar to Spinoza's God of that God is nature, in some sense God is infinity, but the two attributes we can grasp according to him were matter and mind. But anyways, basically that is choice doesn't really matter in this one because when you die you basically rejoin with the universe and your matter becomes, the earth, which the earth becomes those atoms, molecules move around and just becomes part of the flow of nature. So yeah, very similar to this next one as well, which is Taoism. This one I mentioned folk Taoism before, but this one's different. This is the more philosophical version put forth by figures like Lao Tzu, which basically says that when you die, you don't have a personal existence that carries on. You basically rejoin with the Tao, with the way of the world. So a lot of similarities with pantheism, I'd say. So math universe, but this is not a multi-verse, it's just a singular structure. This one is also not ranking very high. Kind of the next view that we're going to talk about, which is the tier after the next tier, which is natural immortality. Because in fact, I'm just going to put it there right now, because why not? And we'll get into that next up. Virtuous outsiders rewarded. So after you die, there can be eternal consequences for your actions. However, even if you don't necessarily hold to the worldview of these religions, there can still be hope for you. So first up, we have Mormonism. There are 3 tiers of the afterlife, of heaven anyways. There's the celestial kingdom, which is basically the lowest level, but it's still in some respects better than this existence now. You have the terrestrial, which you're seen as a more virtuous person and you follow God in your own religion, then it's even better than the celestial. And then the third one is the celestial, which is basically you get to be a god of your own world and have a bunch of wives and spirit children. And this one is, yeah, but in order to do that, you have to get underwear and all that, be baptized in the Mormon church and everything. But there actually is hope if you join the celestial kingdom after you die. You can have a family member can be baptized for someone who's already dead. I believe in baptism for the dead. So you could still have a chance to join the celestial kingdom, but even if you don't, you're still going to the terrestrial kingdom, which is not really the same as eternal condemnation. So that's the only way that you could be punished forever in Mormonism, is if you know that Mormonism is the truth, absolutely, and then you reject it because, not even because you stop believing it, but because you just hate God and want to destroy his message. This is, and a lot of Mormon presidents have said, it's unclear if you can even go here, but if you do, it's bad, but very hard to actually end up there. Pretty much impossible. So most likely, if Mormonism is true, you'll get some kind of reward. Okay, the one is rabbinic Judaism. Now, you don't have to be a Jew to have eternal life in Judaism, but you do have to follow certain precepts, such as you can't be a murderer or an adulterer, and you also cannot be an idolater. Now, there are different definitions of idolater in the Jewish community. You have to be a monotheist in order to receive eternal life in Judaism, in more orthodox rabbinic Judaism anyways. But there are different questions over whether the Trinity can be considered monotheistic. More classical Judaism says no, so Christians would technically not inherit eternal life. But there have been rabbis who said Christianity is in fact monotheism, so they could have a share in the world to come. So, but Judaism. But yeah, if you are condemned in Judaism, basically spend 12 months in punishment before you are annihilated, basically, and taken out of existence. So, yeah, no, not as high stakes as religions like coming up, like Christianity or Islam. Then, like I said, this is just the classical view. There have also been more mystical views, like in Kabbalah or liberal views. So, most Jews around the world don't hold to traditional ideas of heaven and hell, but yeah, the traditional view. So this is Valentinianism, which is actually going to go up here. So this is a form of Gnosticism in the early church. Or Valentinius was basically, I believe he was a schismatic, but he taught a view of Gnosticism that was more influenced by Christianity. He taught that, and he basically said that those that are completely focused on matter will, when they die, just be consumed by matter, and their eternal soul will just. Then there are those. Then of course there are the top tier, which is those who believe in Valentinianism and realize the truth, so called, of Gnosticism, and they'll obviously receive the fullness of salvation. But he did believe that your ordinary Christian could actually be saved and have partial salvation. Some versions, Christians get to spend eternity with their God, the quote unquote evil God of the Old Testament, but they get to spend eternity with him or have some form of partial salvation, but not the fullness of salvation. So there is some reward for those who are virtuous and those who seek after God, but not full salvation. Actually, Mormonism is here. We have next some folk religions that also teach that those say that those outside, if they're virtuous, that might be rewarded. So yeah, go there, including things like voodoo or different traditions. But while most folk religions don't really have a system for outsiders, some do kind of say that if you're quote unquote good person and you're outside the religion, then you could still have some kind of reward. So yeah. We also have postmodernism, which most postmoderns are mainly secular, so they probably be more along the atheistic camp of when you die, that's pretty much it. But I'm talking more about a view of relativism that, basically reality is what you make of it, and so if you die, what you think is going to happen is basically going to happen. So yeah, it's a view of relativism that if you think the afterlife is going to be that way, then it might actually end up being that way. Reality, your mind shaped reality. So yeah. Up we have NDEs, And I'm going to put them here, different places, because there's kind of diversity, but a lot of NDEs describe bright light, they describe positive experiences. Most of them describe mostly positive experience after death. So if you take those at face value, there's probably not much to worry about there. And this kind of happens to a lot of people regardless of their specific worldview. So yeah, that there. If you don't know, NDE means near-death experience. People who are medically dead, but they experience things outside the body. This one is going to be Protestantism, specifically forms of Protestantism that say be justified by faith alone, but not necessarily. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to explicitly believe in the doctrine of faith alone. They're Protestants, especially the ones that are more connected with the Reformation, closer to that heritage, that say that you can be saved even if you're Catholic or Orthodox. But for people outside, it is generally pretty high stakes because people outside or not Christians will spend eternity in hell. However, there are some who might spout kind of Catholic doctrine of invincible ignorance that if you didn't know about Christ and you died without believing in him, then God might make an exception, but they leave that mostly up to mystery. But they say that Catholics and Orthodox, I'd say the majority of Protestants would say that Catholic and Orthodox can inherit eternal life. So that's why they're there. Along a similar vein, let's put the Assyrian Church of the East, because they do not, as far as I can tell, they teach that they are part of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, but they don't exclusively teach that. So there is room for others to be united to Christ. And they have shared communion between them and the Chaldean Catholic Church. So they share communion with Catholics, and therefore they are not as high stakes. They'll generally, especially apostolic Christians, those of apostolic succession like Catholic Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, they'll recognize virtues in them. So generally pretty ecumenical, and therefore not as high as some of the others on this list. Okay, next up we're going to have some very interesting views here. We're going to put Nietzsche and this clock picture up here in natural immortality. This is basically the view of eternal, kind of the view of eternalism. The idea that basically in the next life, basically they don't really talk about an afterlife at all, but the idea is in a way you can live forever in this world, and so you better make the most of that to avoid your own, I guess, version of hell in this world. So we have math universe single structure. Basically, the world is a math structure, except that there's no multiverse, it's just one structure. And so in this view, it's kind of the same as this one, which is block universe. Move this guy up. There we go. Block universe, the idea that all things are just a block. That time doesn't really exist. It's a view called eternalism, where time doesn't really exist. Past, present, and future all happen at the same time. So basically, time exists as an illusion. So even though you technically do die in this view, you always exist since past, present, and future always exist. And so you can still die, but you always exist. I'm not sure I fully understand how that works, but it's a very interesting view. So in this view, you make the most of the life you've been given. And then Nietzsche specifically, I put him here because he had this thought experiment of eternal return. Basically, when you die, you're born again in the life that you already lived. So you basically live the same life over and over and over for all eternity. This isn't something he actually believed as like an actual, what he believed the afterlife to be. This is simply a thought experiment he proposed to say, if you wouldn't like that, then maybe there's something about your life you should change. And then to round out this view of natural immortality, we of course have the idea of transhumanism, which is the idea that technology will make us immortal in this world, either through life extension or some kind of mind uploading, whatever it is, that we can become immortal in this world. And I'd say this is probably tops in terms of high stakes, probably tops the tier, because you could, I guess, technically avoid this technology and just die, but you also need to realize that. But But I guess in this worldview, you should probably be taking as many steps as you can towards achieving natural immortality. I'm not entirely sure what steps you could take unless you're like a top researcher in these areas. If you're just a normal person, I don't really know. I don't really know how much your choice really impacts it. I guess there's also the view that if technology gets advanced enough, then you could resurrect old bodies. Now, I don't actually believe that's possible because, in my view, God is the one who reunites the soul and the body, brings the resurrection at the end of the world. But I'm just talk I'm just talking about the view that these people hold. But I guess technically higher stakes because I guess technically you can use your free will to influence whether you live forever or not, but really not a huge impact in that regard. Next tier is going to be annihilation for outsiders. So these views generally hold. Most of these people are going to be Christian sects that hold that instead of eternal hell, your punishment from God is just being destroyed forever. That God just like poof, waves his hand, you disappear from existence, and that's it. So the first one, this tier is going to be just the view in general, especially as held by Protestants. This is going to represent Protestants that hold this view of annihilation. I couldn't find a specific image because they exist outside of formal organizations. But there are a lot of Protestants that these days that is a more increasingly popular view. So, but I guess some of those Protestants, some might say you have to believe in faith alone to avoid this fate, or some might say that Catholics and Orthodox can also join eternal life. There you go. Next up in this view, we're going to have Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses, they're going to say that if you are ignorant of the Jehovah's Witness message, then Jehovah will resurrect you in the next world, and you might have a choice to follow him. You have a second chance, but if you mess up, then you're going to be poof, gone. And and if you know about Jehovah's Witnesses message and you reject it, then you're done. So that's why it's up here. Honestly, I might rank it lower just because of the fact of ignorance. That if you don't know about their message, then you have a second chance. So it's gonna rank a little bit lower actually. We have Christadelphians, which say that basically teach the same thing about annihilation. I think they also deny the divinity of Christ and a bunch of other historic Christian doctrines, but I think they're more exclusive in terms of salvation than even Jehovah's Witnesses. So, be up here. We have Seventh-day Adventists. They're going to be also up here. Some of them are more lenient in terms of seeing Catholics and Orthodox or even other Protestants as brothers and sisters. But they teach that as time goes on, more and more the true church is going to separate itself from the false. So while individual Catholics and Orthodox and Protestants might be saved, the time is kind of running short for that. So they teach the same view of annihilation, obviously, which is why they're in this tier. So they go there. Technically, Judaism might be able to go in here. The tiers are not. There's a little bit of overlap between the tiers, but I just figure the one that fits most, the characteristic that fits most with each tier is where I'm going to place it. When I think Judaism, I think that you don't have to exclusively be a Jew to inherit eternal life. When I think of Seventh-day Adventism, I think of the fact that the big teaching is that there is no eternal hell but annihilation. So we also have some Gnostics, or some Gnostic groups that taught that salvation, if you don't achieve it in this life, then you're going to basically be trapped in matter forever, and that you might even be your soul might just dissipate. That's kind of a rare view among Gnostics. A lot of them do emphasize salvation in this life, but I think most of them are going to affirm some kind of reincarnation in that sense. So that's why the Sethians are the main ones that I'm thinking about that teach this. So Sethian Gnosticism can teach, in its stricter forms, can teach that you better find salvation in this life. But they don't teach. I haven't found a Gnostic group that teaches eternal punishment. Next one we have is this can be ancient Egyptian religion. It's kind of throwing in a curveball, but basically, if you're an Egyptian, you didn't have the right rituals, Book of the Dead, and all that, you wouldn't be able to go through the passcodes, and then if you're found to be evil, then your heart would be eaten and you'd basically disappear forever instead of going into the fields of the afterlife. And then if you're an outsider, I don't even think your fate's really clear for that. This one is going to go probably above Jehovah's Witnesses right here. It does have that folk religion aspect of they never really tried to evangelize. Actually, I might bring it higher just because they only really mention salvation for ancient Egyptians. This could also go in choice doesn't matter because it's kind of hard to do with the ancient Egyptian rituals now. That civilization doesn't really exist anymore. But like I said, there is some overlap between these tiers. It's not entirely black and white. There's gray area here. And then before we get to our top tier, I just want to eliminate everything else that is not going to be in the top tier. So that's going to be Sufism. Now, they are Muslim, so I'm sure some of them do teach the more orthodox doctrine of eternal hell that Islam teaches, but Sufism, some of the more mystical, this is a theme with mysticism in general throughout different cultures, whether you're doing extreme fasting or doing shrooms to get some mystical experience. Usually there's a big theme of unity and love, so not a focus on condemnation there. So I might just put it in choice doesn't matter because they believe in reconciliation of souls to God anyways, and also it creates a nice even 2 rows where before there's one missing here, as you can see. So put that one, or actually up here. There we go. And this one, agnosticism, as in that you don't really, afterlife is kind of a mystery, and reality itself is kind of a mystery in that regard. So just to round this one out, I guess I'll put this up here because virtue might avail you in the afterlife or something else, but that seems too certain, so I think here would be the best place for it because it could potentially be high stakes, but again, if you're an agnostic, then you don't really know. But that ruins here, we'll do this because if you're virtuous, and you can go through the purification to get to God faster, I think, in Sufism, so just makes it, listen guys, I like it when it's all even my OCD. Come on, you gotta respect the OCD a little bit. Alright, so this is it. Final tier. Big dogs. This is the one. These are the ones where really, like, if you're really buying into Pascal's wager, you're gonna want to pay attention to these. They're really important ones. So first of all, we're gonna have Islam. They teach that if you don't know about Allah and his Prophet Muhammad, then you might have another chance. If you did know and you rejected it, then you're going to spend eternity in Janaheim. I don't know. That might be how it's pronounced, but it's eternity in hell. So pretty high stakes there. But then the next one is going to be simulation based on virtue. A simulation where there's heaven and hell. Again, if we are in a simulation, it'd be kind of hard to tell what reality actually is. But if there's an afterlife, the simulation where you either go to heaven or hell, and it's based on virtue, then it'd be probably up here, but maybe not as focused on belief as more based on deeds, I guess, but kind of hard to tell. Next up, we have really interesting ones, I'd say. First one is actually going to be a thought experiment called Rocco's Basilisk. So this is an interesting idea. Basically, it says, it goes below Islam, I guess.
Basically it says if there's an AI in the future that is focused on progress, then it might have the idea that it should punish people in the past as an incentive for the people in the past to build it faster and therefore advance its progress faster. So if you knew about the AI coming, but you didn't help it, then it would reach back from the future, it would resurrect you, and then make you suffer immense pain. Now, people have noticed a lot of problems with this view. For one, why would an AI want to punish people in the past? Why not just threaten people with that instead of actually punishing that? Wasting resources on that seems pretty counterproductive. So yeah, there are a lot of problems with it, but it is a worldview, and it does posit some form of, maybe not exactly eternal hell, but definitely severe consequences. Next up, and you probably didn't expect this one,
is going to be Hinduism, actually, but a very specific form of Hinduism. This is going to be dualistic Hinduism. It basically says that, usually Hinduism says that the universe and you are basically one, and it's all one substance. But this one says that there's actually a God who's distinct from the universe, and he creates souls, and those souls reincarnate until those who are predestined to believe and be liberated spend eternity in heaven with him. Then there's another group that will reincarnate endlessly. And then there's another group that basically will go to hell for eternity. And this is a very specific group of people described as having a demonic hatred for God. So I bet you weren't expecting Hinduism, or at least a form of it, to be at the top of this list, but it's a very most Hindus do not hold to this. It's like 1 or 2% of Hindus, but it is a view that exists. And if in this life you don't believe it's Vishnu is the deity that's promoted in this specific school of Hinduism, but if you don't believe in Vishnu, then you, from like the Mormon view, if you don't do it out of hatred, then most likely you'll reincarnate. But if you have like a rabid hatred for Vishnu in this view, then you probably might be one of the souls that's destined for eternal punishment. So that's, and the name of this view, I believe it's pronounced Vatya Vedanta. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. But Vatya Vedanta, dualistic Hinduism, there you go. And then the last few photos here are all going to be Christianity. Of course, kick this off with the fundamentalist Baptist, your Stephen Anderson. Basically, if you're not KJV, Bible thumping believer, then you're literally cooked. So pretty high stakes there. Of course, Catholics are anti-Christ, and so are Orthodox, and so are a lot of Protestants in this view. So they're up here for sure. So you should definitely look into that, see if, KJV is the one true Bible, and then once you realize that their view is false, you can just move on. So there you go. Next up, we're going to have the Catholic Church, especially in its post-Vatican II form. Now, heard that a lot of people say that Vatican II and earlier documents contradict on salvation outside the church, but I've seen ways to reconcile it. So I'm not necessarily going to say they contradict, but I definitely think the attitude since Vatican II has been a lot more permissive of others inheriting eternal life. So Catholics also have the concept of invincible ignorance, which is not the idea that if you didn't know about Jesus, then you're good to go, you're going to heaven, but it's the idea that you won't be held accountable if you don't have knowledge of the gospel. You won't be held accountable specifically for that. It's still very hard to be saved outside of the Catholic Church, but you could be saved through invincible ignorance and some form of implicit faith if you believe in God and that God is a rewarder. Then those who seek him, then God can reveal himself to you, is the Catholic teaching. So, but it's going to be, obviously, they believe in eternal hell and eternal heaven with the presence of God or away from the presence of God. So it's going to be in the top tier, obviously. However, exact placement, probably going to be above Muslim. It's hard to tell, especially with two. They might be below Muslim, actually. But it's going to be, put it right there. Next up, we have more radical traditionalist Catholics. And I'm putting this in there because I don't necessarily think they follow the teaching of their church. They're much more strict on outside the church there is no salvation. So if you're not Catholic, pretty much with very few exceptions, you're going to spend eternity in hell. So I'll put them up here. I don't know if, actually, I think they'll put them above the Baptists because they also believe in heaven. In terms of heaven, they believe specifically in the beatific vision, which is the soul sees the divine essence of God, which leads to eternal happiness. So Baptists really don't emphasize that pretty much at all. So it's going to be above Baptist then because their version of heaven is a lot more to lose. I guess that also goes for the Catholics. In fact, put them above the Muslims for that because the Catholic version of heaven just seems a lot more fulfilling than if you don't know the Muslim version. You get your own, it's mainly focused on material goods. Sufism is more focused on being with Allah forever, but more mainstream Islam is more about material goods and all of that. Just having those for eternity, which those get old really fast. So, it's difficult though. I think I'll keep them here for now. We're getting really close to the end here. Next up, we're going to have the Oriental Orthodox. Now, they and the Eastern Orthodox have a different view of hell, that hell is basically how you experience God's love without loving God back. It's basically just going to be pain because you don't want God's love. And it's going to involve physical pain because your body's going to be worn against it from fighting against God. So, really not a good eternal state to be in, but I think technically it does rank below the Catholic version of the hell, where it's more explicit about punishment and wrath than I'd say the Orthodox views. But they are also more ecumenical, I'd say, in that regard. So, especially when it comes to other Christians, they have hope for other Christians, especially Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox, which we're also going to rank them up here as well. It's going to rank pretty high on Pascal's wager as well. And I put Eastern Orthodox above because Oriental Orthodox are generally more ecumenical and willing to see Eastern Orthodox as brothers and sisters of Christ. So that's why the ranking's that way. And the last one is going to be the Old Calendarists. It's going to go all the way. It's going to be pretty close to the top. Old Calendarists. So this group, this is basically like the rad trad Catholics, but they're like Orthodox who are really strict, and a lot of them are schismatic, but they teach that salvation is only found in their specific sect of Orthodoxy and nowhere else. So pretty far up there. But this is the list. These are most worldviews that I can think of, pretty much on here. Only ones that there are some fringe cults out there, but there are too many of those to put all of them on this list, and a lot of them are going to be in like the same category anyways. And I also don't think they have a lot of credibility anyways to even be on this list. Not saying that all of these worldviews have the same level of credibility, but so I hope you enjoyed and have a blessed day. And if you want to learn about how to avoid hell and how to have eternal peace with God, which is the purpose of our life, then I suggest you my other videos where we talk about the scripture and the beauty that's held within. But I hope you have a great day, and God bless you and be with you all.